At 24, an Oscar and a Grammy were already hers. Her voice was everywhere. Radio, movie theaters, award shows, like the decade couldn't move without it. And then, while she was still young enough to be building a dynasty, the calls stopped getting returned. Irene Cara was the sound of the 1980s, the woman behind Fame and Flashdance. What a feeling! She helped write The Dream, and the Academy handed her Best Original Song. Triple threat, top tier, undeniable. The industry held her up as proof that talent wins. Then she asked to be paid. What followed was a long legal fight, a reputation bruised by whispers, and a slow vanishing act that ended far from the spotlight, in Florida, where she lived quietly until her death at 63. This is the story of how the music industry builds stars, and what can happen when one of them fights back. Irene Cara Escalera was born in 1959 in the Bronx, New York, to a Puerto Rican father and a Cuban-American mother. By these time most children are learning to read, she was already performing. At 7 years old, she sang with her father's band. Before she reached her teenage years, she had starred in an off-Broadway production. Her childhood moved at a pace that suggested destiny, or at least that's what the adults around her believed. She appeared on PBS's The Electric Company alongside Morgan Freeman and Rita Moreno. She took roles in 1970s stage musicals and television miniseries. By her early teens, she was already recording and performing publicly, building credits in both music and television, before most kids have figured out who they even want to be. The message was clear from the beginning. People told her she would be a star. Not that she could be, that she would be. It was presented as inevitability, and she was trained accordingly. Her performances were described as highly disciplined, a phrase that sounds like praise but carries weight when applied to a child. She could sing, dance, and a triple threat before she was old enough to drive. In 1976, at 17, she earned the title role in the Motown-era musical film Sparkle. The movie wasn't a box office phenomenon, but it found its audience. Black viewers in particular connected with Cara's portrayal of Sparkle Williams, seeing in her an innocent yet magnetic screen presence that felt rare and genuine. The film became a cult favorite, the kind of work that gets rediscovered and reassessed for decades. 3 years later, she appeared in Roots: The Next Generations, playing Bertha in the acclaimed miniseries. Critics noted that her performance defied the cliched roles typically offered to Black women in that era. John Willis's Screen World named her one of 1976's most promising new actors. Right On magazine readers voted her top actress that year. By the time she reached her late teens, Irene Cara had already built what most performers spend decades assembling, a resume that demonstrated range, critical skill, recognition that suggested longevity, and a reputation for work ethic that made directors trust her with difficult material. She had everything except the one thing that would have protected her later. She had no powerful connections, no family dynasty in the entertainment business, no manager with enough clout to make executives nervous. She was a young woman from the Bronx with extraordinary talent and no safety net. The industry noticed both facts. In 1980, everything aligned. The film Fame was in production, a groundbreaking musical about students at the New York City High School of Performing Arts. Irene Cara auditioned as a dancer. She got the job. Then she sang. The producers heard her voice and rewrote the part of Coco Hernandez specifically for her. What had been a dancing role became a starring vehicle. Coco was a fiery performing arts student with dreams as big as her talent, a character that seemed to merge with the woman playing her. Cara performed 2 songs on the soundtrack. The title track, Fame, was an explosive anthem that turned the film's central promise into a statement of generational ambition. The ballad, Out Here on My Own, was something quieter and more vulnerable, a song about the loneliness that lives alongside ambition. Both songs became hits, and both were nominated for the Academy Award for Best Original Song. Cara was invited to perform them at the ceremony, an unusually rare showcase for a young artist and a sign that Hollywood understood exactly what it had in her. That night, the song Fame won Best Original Song, an Oscar awarded to the writers, while Cara's performance helped cement the moment in pop culture memory. The aftermath came quickly. Grammy nominations arrived, including Best New Artist, a Golden Globe nomination for Best Actress in a Musical or Comedy. Billboard and Cashbox both named her the year's top new female vocalist. At 21, Irene Cara had achieved what her childhood had promised. By any measurable standard, a star. The producers of Fame recognized what they had. They launched a television series based on the film and invited Cara to reprise her role as Coco Hernandez. She declined. That choice drew a line. She wanted to be taken seriously as a recording artist, and a TV schedule would have boxed her in that would limit her options. She saw her future in music, in creating rather than repeating. It was a choice that demonstrated ambition and independence, qualities that would later cost her dearly. For now, though, it seemed like wisdom. The Fame TV series would run for years without her. Irene Cara would chase something bigger. 3 years after Fame, she reached higher than anyone expected. The 1983 film Flashdance needed a theme song. Giorgio Moroder, the legendary producer behind Donna Summer's disco hits, was composing the music. Cara was brought in to co-write the lyrics with Keith Forsey and to perform the track. She was initially hesitant. Working with Moroder meant inevitable comparisons to Donna Summer, and Cara had spent years establishing her own identity. But she took the job, reportedly scribbling the lyrics in a car en route to the studio, working fast under pressure. Flashdance, What a Feeling, became one of the defining sounds of 1983. It reached #1 around the world. The song's combination of Moroder's propulsive production and Cara's soaring vocals captured something about the era's optimism, its belief that passion and hard work could overcome any obstacle. At the 1984 Academy Awards, Flashdance, What a Feeling won Best Original Song, and Cara shared that Oscar as a co-writer alongside Giorgio Moroder and Keith Forsey. She was only 24, young enough that the win felt like the start of a long reign, and the moment carried extra weight for what it represented. A Black Hispanic woman credited not just as a voice, but as part of the writing of a global anthem. The trophy was real. The history was real, and the pressure behind it was, too. She was 24 years old and seemingly unstoppable, but something was wrong. In photographs from that Oscar night, Cara smiles with her statue, radiating the confidence of a woman at the peak of her powers. Years later, she described what was actually happening behind that smile. "I was putting on a face of being on top of the world," she said, "and on the inside, I was trying to figure out how to sue my label." She was pretending everything was fine when everything was falling apart. The problem was simple and devastating. For all the noise her work was making in the world, the money flowing back to her didn't match the size of the success. Her record company was Network Records, run by Al Corey, a powerful executive with a reputation for spotting hits and turning them into machines. In industry profiles, he was treated like a kingmaker, a man who had already moved in the orbit of major names and knew exactly how to structure a career, a catalog, and a contract so the money kept moving in the right direction. When she left her previous situation to sign with Corey's company, the deal looked, on the surface, like an upgrade. In the version Cara would later describe through legal filings, she believed she had been promised a partnership, profit sharing that sounded fair enough to make a young artist feel protected. For someone without a dynasty behind her, without a lawyer standing over every comma, that kind of promise reads like security. But as the success piled up, soundtracks, radio play, the kind of exposure that turns your name into a brand, Cara believed she was seeing the numbers bend in a way she couldn't explain. By 1985, she wasn't just unhappy. She was preparing to go to war. That year, she filed a lawsuit seeking $10 million, alleging that millions in royalties and earnings were being withheld, and that the accounting around her work was being manipulated to keep her. Share small. In that fight, the details mattered. what counted as expenses, what got charged back to her, how profits were calculated, what was considered recoupable, and what was quietly treated as her problem. This wasn't just a personal grievance. It was the ugly mechanics of an industry where young artists are often expected to accept opaque bookkeeping as the price of admission, and only learn how the game works when they finally question the math. Cara's side argued that the agreements she'd been handed weren't simply unfavorable. They were designed to trap her. In the language attributed to her complaint, she viewed the contracts as one-sided and oppressive, the kind of paperwork that looks formal and legitimate while quietly stripping leverage away from the person whose voice is selling the product. And the imbalance wasn't accidental. Across the table were people who had done this for decades. People fluent in entertainment law, in delays, in fine print, in the slow grind that can exhaust anyone who tries to fight back. The expectation is usually simple. Be grateful, keep singing, and let the adults handle the money. But Cara wasn't willing to stay quiet. She started asking direct questions. She started demanding real answers. And by the time she stepped onto that Oscar stage for Flashdance, What a Feeling, she was already carrying two truths at once. The world saw a woman at the peak of her powers, and behind the smile, she had already decided she was going to confront the people who controlled her paycheck. In 1985, at what should have been the height of her career, Irene Cara filed a $10 million lawsuit against Al Corey and Network Records. The complaint alleged unpaid royalties of at least $2 million. Cara's lawyers argued that the 50-50 profit split Corey had promised was never honored, that expenses were manipulated to reduce her share, and that the entire arrangement had been designed to exploit her. During the legal proceedings, evidence of what Cara's team called Hollywood accounting emerged. The label had charged items like limousine rides against her profits, making it appear on paper that she hadn't earned significant net revenue. A witness for Corey's side inadvertently validated this approach by acknowledging it was typical industry practice, a casual admission that young artists were routinely cheated until they gained enough power to renegotiate. Corey, meanwhile, had only grown more powerful since signing Cara. His label had merged with Geffen Records, giving him access to even greater resources and industry connections. He could afford to drag out the lawsuit indefinitely. Cara could not. But the legal fight wasn't the worst part. Within months of filing suit, Cara noticed something changing in how the industry treated her. She started hearing rumors. Stories circulated that she was difficult to work with, whispers about diva behavior, insinuations about personal problems. None of this had followed her before the lawsuit. She had been known for discipline, for professionalism, for the work ethic that had defined her since childhood. All of a sudden, she said later, I was hearing stories about how difficult I was to work with, ridiculous rumors about what a diva I was. Record executives stopped taking her meetings. Film producers stopped returning calls. Casting agents who had once praised her work now closed their doors. She went to industry events and restaurants and felt the temperature change when she walked in. Sneers, cold shoulders, former colleagues looking through her as if she had ceased to exist. It seemed that I sued one man, she said, and it just kind of spiraled into the entire industry turning against me. Cara later said the consequences felt bigger than one lawsuit. That after she challenged a powerful executive, doors started closing in ways she couldn't explain by coincidence alone. She described a sudden shift in how she was spoken about and how often calls were returned, as if her name had become inconvenient in rooms where it once carried heat. Whether it was an organized blacklist or the quieter reality of an industry that protects itself through gossip and caution, the outcome looked the same from where she stood. Fewer opportunities, less support, and a career forced to reroute. The cost of standing up was everything. She left Los Angeles. She couldn't tolerate living there any longer. The social ostracism, the sneers, the sense of being erased from an industry she had helped define. She went back to New York first, then elsewhere. Anywhere that wasn't Hollywood. The lawsuit dragged on for 8 years. 8 years of legal fees, depositions, uncertainty. 8 years of watching her prime earning years disappear while courts processed paperwork. Her 1983 album, What a Feelin', had produced hits, but the follow-up, Charismatic, was delayed by the legal turmoil, and finally released in 1987 to minimal fanfare. It failed to chart. Elektra Records signed her briefly in the late 1980s, but according to later accounts, had no real interest and did little to support her work. The machinery that turns talent into commercial success had been switched off, so she went where the stigma didn't follow. She toured Europe and Asia in the 1990s, performing for audiences who knew her music, but not the industry gossip that had poisoned her reputation at home. She did backup session vocals for other artists, Lou Reed, Oleta Adams, work that paid bills but offered no path back to stardom. In 1993, she joined a touring production of Jesus Christ Superstar, playing Mary Magdalene. There was perhaps some dark symmetry in the casting. A woman condemned by society, seeking redemption. She also voiced a character in an obscure animated sequel to Snow White, a project so forgotten that Disney later sued its makers. That same year, after 8 exhausting years, the lawsuit finally concluded. A California jury sided with Irene Cara and awarded her $1.5 million in damages. The verdict was real, but the win didn't rewind time. The case had consumed years that most artists use to build momentum, stack projects, and cement industry relationships. Even with a jury on her side, she was walking back into a business that had already shifted its attention elsewhere. In the years that followed, her biggest songs kept resurfacing, on soundtracks, on radio, in the cultural bloodstream, long after the industry stopped treating her like a current tense star. The music held its ground, even when the business around it moved on. She could have tried to leverage that moment into a full comeback. Instead, she made a different choice. In later interviews, Cara described a life that sounded less like defeat than like deliberate withdrawal. "I have a beautiful home by the beach and life is good," she told Songwriter Universe. "I live off my royalties and I work when I want to." She explained that she made more money not working than working and considered herself semi-retired. This wasn't the career trajectory anyone had predicted for her in 1984. But it was perhaps something more valuable: freedom. The lawsuit victory had given her control of her master recordings, a prize that many artists never achieve. The ongoing royalties from Fame and Flashdance provided financial stability without requiring her to navigate an industry that had tried to destroy her. In 1999, she formed an all-female band called Hot Caramel. They worked on their own schedule, eventually releasing an album in 2011. It wasn't a commercial blockbuster. It didn't need to be. She made music on her terms, with nobody else steering the profit. She surfaced occasionally on television. In 2005, she appeared on the NBC show Hit Me Baby One More Time, a program where former stars performed their classic hits alongside contemporary songs. She performed Flashdance, What a Feeling, and won her episode, demonstrating that her voice and stage presence had lost nothing over 2 decades. In 2008, she joined the CMT reality series Gone Country for a season, a lighthearted experiment with country music that suggested she could still laugh at herself and the industry that had wronged her. These appearances were reminders. Irene Cara was still alive, still talented, still capable of commanding a stage, but she had no interest in re-entering the machine that had chewed her up. She had built something smaller and more sustainable, a life on her own terms. At some point, semi-retirement became something closer to disappearance. She settled in Largo, Florida, near Tampa Bay, in a modest house in a quiet neighborhood. She ran a small entertainment company from a nearby office, managing her affairs with minimal assistance, and she withdrew, slowly then completely, from public life. Her neighbors had no idea who she was. A woman who lived across the street described her as a recluse who didn't talk to anyone. The presence of a former global superstar in their suburban enclave was, as one put it, the best-kept secret ever. Another neighbor tried to befriend her. She invited Cara on walks, called and texted to check in, made the ordinary gestures of neighborhood kindness. Cara rarely responded. She avoided face-to-face contact, preferring to return calls via email or text from her computer. She cited concerns about privacy, though perhaps it was something deeper, a learned wariness about letting people in. Those who observed her in those final years noticed she didn't seem well. She mentioned health issues to at least one neighbor and rarely ventured outside. The woman who had once commanded stages from the Oscars to Madison Square Garden now lived in a kind of self-imposed invisibility. Then the pandemic arrived, and whatever isolation existed before intensified. Her manager, Betty McCormick, later said that Cara was very afraid of getting the virus and really struggled during that period. She essentially locked herself away, rarely leaving her house for the last years of her life. McCormick also addressed the old rumors directly. Whatever personal struggles Cara had faced during the stress of her lawsuit decades earlier, they were long behind her. She was not abusing anything. She was not relapsing into old difficulties. She was simply a woman in declining health who had learned, through painful experience, to trust almost no one. On November 25, 2022, Irene Cara died in her Florida home. She was 63 years old. Initial reports did not specify a cause of death, which led to the kind of speculation that had followed her throughout her career. Months later, the medical examiner released the findings: hypertensive heart disease, aggravated by high cholesterol and diabetes. Her heart had given out after years of strain. The news spread quickly. Tributes arrived from the artists who had grown up watching her, who had seen themselves reflected in a confident young woman of color, claiming space at pop culture's highest levels. Oscar-winning actress Viola Davis praised Cara's talent and the doors she had opened. Debbie Allen, who had starred alongside her in Fame, called her a gifted and beautiful genius and invoked the famous lyric, "Remember her name." People remembered, some instantly, some only after the first chorus hit their memory. In her later years, she lived quietly in Florida, far from the spotlight she once defined. Flashdance, What a Feeling, never really went away. It stayed lodged in pop culture as one of the defining hits of its era, replayed, referenced, and recognized even by people who weren't alive when it first went to #1. Irene Cara was, by any reasonable measure, a trailblazer. She arrived on the scene before the full commercial dominance of Whitney Houston, Janet Jackson, Mariah Carey, Beyoncé, the Black female superstars who would define subsequent decades. One writer called her a pathfinder, someone who proved that a young woman of Puerto Rican and Cuban heritage from the Bronx could win Oscars and Grammys and top the charts worldwide. She showed what was possible. Others walked through doors she had pried open. Her fight for fair payment also left a legacy, though a complicated one. Her case became a cautionary tale about the dangers of challenging powerful industry figures. It demonstrated both the moral courage required to demand what you're owed and the brutal consequences that can follow. Today, when artists like Taylor Swift speak openly about contract disputes and master recording ownership, they echo battles that Irene Cara fought decades earlier, largely alone, and at far greater personal cost. Years before the lawsuits and the fallout, she sang a ballad that captured the question underneath ambition: where do you belong when the lights go out? That question follows her story like a shadow. The hits made her famous. The fallout is what made the story. She proved she could perform, she proved she could write, and then she proved she could survive the kind of punishment the industry rarely admits it hands out. The industry kept moving, and the people in power changed, but the machine didn't suddenly become gentle. Whatever progress came later didn't erase what it cost her in real time. What she did get was something harder to quantify: control over her masters, royalties that continued flowing decades after the hits, a home by the beach, time to work on her spirituality, as she put it, to heal from the anger and bitterness that the industry had inflicted. Was it enough? That's not a question anyone else can answer. She made choices: to sue, to leave, to withdraw, that shaped a life very different from the one her childhood seemed to promise. Some of those choices were forced on her by circumstances beyond her control. Others were assertions of will, refusals to play a game whose rules had been designed to exploit her. She sang about fame as if it were a gift. She learned it was also a weapon, one that could be turned against the people who achieved it. And in the end, she chose something quieter than fame, a life small enough to control, private enough to protect. Irene Cara taught a generation to dream. Her songs still do. But her story teaches something else, something about the cost of demanding fairness in a system built on unfairness, about the isolation that follows courage, about the strange fate of being remembered by millions who never knew what really happened. She asked us to remember her name. We should also remember what that name came to represent: talent that transcended its era, injustice that never received full accounting, and a woman who survived both by disappearing into a life entirely her own.